Hi, I'm Sass, the lead coach and founder of Emotion Ally Coaching, and the purpose of this presentation is to outline some of the differences between communication styles of neurodivergent people and their predominant neurotype peers, in the hope that by developing this understanding, we can reduce miscommunication and improve understanding between colleagues of differing neurotypes. So here's a bit of a fun introductory activity for you. Can you please have a look at these celebrities? See if you can figure out what they all have in common, other than the fact they are super rich, super famous, and super successful. Given the subject of the presentation, it may come as no surprise that these people are all neurodivergent. And I include this slide here because people often assume that neurodivergence always means disadvantage. Whilst I in no way deny that being neurodivergent in a world set up for predominant neurotype populations, I want to come at this subject from a strength-based perspective because I feel that understanding neurodiversity requires a shift away from deficit-focused perspectives and a movement towards recognising and celebrating the unique strengths and contributions of neurodivergent individuals. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and why this particular subject matters to me. I'm a resilience coach, mental health and autism specialist social worker with nearly 2 decades of teaching in the state sector. I've worked with a large number of neurodivergent adults and children over the years. I've got a fair few qualifications in linked areas and would describe neurodivergence as one of my high focused interests. It's something I'm really passionate about, particularly as I myself have over 40 years of lived experience of being a neurodivergent person. In short, improved communication between neurotypes facilitates better understanding and empathy, which is crucial for providing appropriate accommodations and support in various settings, and that includes education, employment, healthcare and social interactions. Miscommunication and a lack of understanding can perpetuate stereotypes and stigmatisation of neurodivergent individuals, whereas improved communication allows neurotypical individuals to recognise and harness the strengths of neurodivergent people, maximising their potential and fostering environments where all individuals can thrive. By promoting open dialogue and understanding, we can minimise conflicts caused by miscommunication and mutually beneficial solutions can be reached. Improving communication between the neurotypes fosters collaboration and creativity, which in turn benefits organisations, communities, and if I'm honest, society as a whole. By effectively articulating experiences and challenges, neurodivergent people and their allies can advocate for policy changes, accessibility improvements, and social inclusion initiatives. So my key objectives in this presentation are to help you understand what is meant by the term neurodiversity, the context of social communication, by which I mean the way that we communicate is dependent on situation and environment. I'd like to talk to you about why the language we use to discuss neurodiversity matters, what we might need to consider when communicating with colleagues and friends and pretty much anyone who has a different neurotype to our own. In doing so, I'm hoping I can give you some hints and tips to facilitate clear communication between predominant neurotype and neurodivergent colleagues. And I just want to also outline the advantages of having a neurodiverse workplace. So what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is the concept that celebrates the natural spectrum of neurological differences among individuals. So it recognises that every person's brain functions uniquely, and it encompasses a broad range of cognitive variations, including those typically considered neurodivergent, such as autistic people, people with ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, as well as what are commonly known as neurotypical individuals. Rather than viewing these differences as deficits or disorders, the neurodiversity paradigm sees them as just inherent aspects of human variation, each with its own strengths, challenges and perspectives. By taking a neuro-affirming approach to diversity, we embrace and affirm the diverse ways in which people's brains process information. This means we can foster an environment of acceptance, understanding and accommodation that allows individuals to thrive regardless of their neurocognitive profile. This approach acknowledges that what may be considered atypical or unconventional ways of thinking or interacting can actually offer unique insights, creativity and problem-solving abilities. The idea that the divergence in neurodiversity is socially constructed means that what we consider normal or typical about how the human brain works is influenced by the society, culture and history of where we live. This means what is seen as different or unusual in how people think or behave isn't always the same everywhere. Also, how we label these differences is shaped by our cultural views and medical standards. Some ways of thinking and behaving are seen as, inverted commas, normal or good, while others are seen as abnormal or needing to be fixed, depending on the prevailing societal beliefs and norms. For example, traits commonly associated with neurodivergent conditions such as intense focus, unconventional thinking patterns or heightened sensory sensitivity can be viewed as strengths or can be viewed as deficits depending on the context. For example, if you were to be able to hyper-focus on a presentation, or you were to intensely focus on a piece of work for a client, that could be considered a strength. Whereas if you are a parent with a child who is hyper-focused on Minecraft for the last 68 hours without eating, you might view it more of a challenge. Moreover, the classification and labelling of neurocognitive differences as divergent or atypical are often influenced by diagnostic criteria and medical frameworks. These frameworks prioritise certain ways of thinking and functioning as normal or desirable and tend to pathologise others that deviate from what is commonplace. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 15 and 20% of the general population are neurodivergent, and these typically come from studies and research conducted in areas of psychology, psychiatry and neuroscience. The estimates are based on a variety of sources, including prevalence studies, diagnostic criteria and population surveys. The term neurodivergence has quite a flexible application and can sometimes include Tourette's and occasionally acquired brain injury. Others have been known to use it to encompass conditions such as bipolar. However, the most common usage is as an umbrella term for autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia and dyscalculia. So where do the difficulties in cross-neurotype communication come from? Recent research has shed light on the dynamics of communication between individuals with different neurocognitive profiles, and it highlights that communication difficulties stem from a bidirectional mismatch of communication styles, rather than inherent deficits in neurodivergent individuals. What that means is people on both sides fail to understand where the other person is coming from. Studies have shown that these differences in communication styles can lead to misunderstandings and challenges in social interactions. For instance, there was a study published in the journal Psychological Science which found that autistic individuals demonstrate heightened accuracy in reading facial expressions compared to neurotypical individuals, which is contrary to common stereotypes. Autistic individuals often possess a keen ability to interpret nonverbal cues such as facial expressions, albeit they may interpret it in a different manner to neurotypical individuals. On the other hand, predominant neurotypical individuals might have certain communication tendencies that contribute to challenging interactions with autistic individuals. Research published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders suggests that neurotypical individuals may be less willing to engage in communication with autistic individuals due to unfamiliarity or discomfort with the differences in communication style. Moreover, studies have also indicated that neurotypical individuals might overestimate autistic people's egocentricity. What I mean by that is they perceive them as more self-centered or lacking in empathy than they actually are. And this misperception can lead to biases in social interaction and hinder effective communication. Furthermore, research published in Autism Research suggests that neurotypical individuals may have difficulty accurately reading the mental states of autistic individuals, which again can communicate to misunderstandings and create social challenges for autistic people. This difficulty in mentalizing or understanding others' thoughts and feelings is likely to stem from the differences in communication style between neurodivergent and neurotypical individuals. So here's the thing. Communication isn't just about what we say. It's also influenced by the saying. What it's okay to say or do in one culture is seen as rude in another. If you think about putting your feet on the table or showing the soles of your feet, that's considered extremely rude in Thailand, but perfectly acceptable in the West. So direct eye contact is seen as a sign of confidence and respect in some cultures, but in others it's seen as confrontational or disrespectful. And similarly, any gestures, body language and facial expressions we use carry different meanings and interpretations depending on the cultural context. Moreover, beyond cultural factors, that we've also got a myriad of other social factors that influence the way we understand the way that people are communicating. And that includes hierarchies, the physical environment, relationship dynamics, available technology. We've all had an email where we've gone, oh, that person seemed really, really rude, when actually that wasn't their intention at all, or vice versa. We know that the power dynamics between people can shape how we understand the information being given to us. So, for example, people who are in positions of authority often have a greater influence over the interpretation of a message than others. And when we're thinking about this, we need to think about preferred communication styles and sensory profiles, because they both play a crucial role in shaping how we perceive, understand and engage in communication. So what I mean by this is some people prefer verbal communication, love a chat, bit of small talk, while others may prefer to rely on non-verbal cues or even written communication such as emails. Similarly, the way that we take information in through our senses can impact our receptiveness to certain forms of communication. We all know it's increasingly difficult to communicate effectively in, for example, a noisy bar. If we think about culture shock as an analogy for cross-neurotype communication, we can highlight some of the challenges and misunderstandings that can arise when people with different neurocognitive profiles interact. So, culture shock occurs when individuals experience disorientation and discomfort when they are exposed to a culture that's different from their own. In cross-neurotype communication, we may encounter cognitive dissonance and uncertainty when interacting with someone whose way of thinking, being and communication differs significantly from our own. This can lead to misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and feelings of discomfort and frustration. To give an example, Paris syndrome refers to a psychological condition where people experience extreme disappointment, anxiety, and even delusional beliefs when their expectations of Paris as a romanticized city don't match the reality. In cross-neurotype communication, individuals might have preconceived notions or stereotypes about how other people should think, communicate, or behave based on their neurotype. When these expectations aren't met, it can lead to cognitive dissonance and emotional distress. Stendhal syndrome is a psychosomatic disorder which is characterized by intense emotional and physical reactions such as dizziness, palpitations, and even hallucinations. And that's triggered by exposure to great works of art or overwhelming beauty and is commonly associated with the city of Florence. In cross-neurotype communication, we can experience intense emotional responses when confronted with cognitive diversity, the unique perspectives of others. This can manifest as heightened empathy, sensory overload, cognitive overload, and might result in people shutting or melting down. The best way I have of describing what a shutdown or a meltdown might feel like is that it is too many apps open on a mobile phone, so the mobile phone has slowed down and is no longer able to function until we are able to reset it, give it some time and space to adjust, recalibrate, and start again. In each of these analogies, the key takeaway is the importance of having empathy, understanding, and flexibility in cross-neurotype communication. Just as travellers abroad have to adapt and acclimate to unfamiliar cultures or experiences, people engaging in cross-neurotype communication have to be willing to listen, learn, and adjust their communication style on both sides to bridge the gap between different neurocognitive profiles. So why does language matter? Well, the language we use in discussing neurodiversity plays a crucial role in shaping perceptions, attitudes, and experiences relating to neurodiversity. When we talk about neurodivergent people in a neuroaffirming way, we consider the language we use to promote respect, dignity, reduce stigma, foster inclusivity, empowerment, self-advocacy, and improve communication. It also helps to advance research and progress. So, certain terms which were commonly used maybe 10-15 years ago are actually really quite problematic. For example, the term Asperger, which was coined by Hans Asperger to describe a particular presentation of an autistic individual, is actually associated with the eugenicist history of Hans Asperger, who collaborated with the Nazi regime. Additionally, functioning labels, high functioning, low functioning, are massive oversimplifications and stereotype individuals, reducing them to their perceived abilities or deficits rather than acknowledging their complexity. When we use terms like high functioning or low functioning, we imply that people who are high functioning are not entitled to support or care. And when we use the term low functioning, we set a ceiling on what people are actually capable of. So our language choice can either perpetuate or challenge the stigma around neurodiversity. Stigmatizing language reinforces negative stereotypes and contributes to discrimination and marginalization. Functioning labels imply a hierarchy of worth based on your perceived ability, and it's much preferable to use neutral or strength-based language to help reduce stigma and promote acceptance and understanding. When we use neuroaffirming language, we include and empower neurodivergent individuals in our discussions about their own experiences and identities. It recognises their expertise as a neurodivergent person and agency in advocating for their needs and their preferences. Terms like Asperger's may also exclude people who do not identify with that label or who prefer identity-first language, i.e., I'm an autistic person. Similarly, functioning labels undermine individual self-perception and self-advocacy by pigeonholing them into narrow categories based on their perceived abilities. We need to be making sure we're using language that accurately reflects the diverse experiences and perspectives of the neurodivergent community, and that helps to foster understanding and effective communication. Terms like Asperger's doesn't fully capture the breadth and complexity of the autism spectrum, and it can lead to misunderstandings and misrepresentations. Functioning labels oversimplify individuals' experience and hinder meaningful dialogue about strength, challenge, and support needs. By using precise and respectful language, researchers can conduct studies that accurately reflect diversity and the nuance of neurodivergent people's experiences. So this is really about understanding and respecting how people with different thinking styles might communicate. Stimming is really common among neurodivergent people. If I had my camera on, you could see me doing things with my hands, playing with my ring, playing with my hair, picking at my teeth, biting my nails, all that kind of good stuff. Everybody in the world does stimming. It stands for self-stimulatory behaviour. However, it's often more obvious in neurodivergent people. So when you say stop tapping your leg, actually that can be quite harmful for the person who is stimming at the time. They are repetitive movements or actions that help you to regulate your sensory input and to manage stress or anxiety. If we can accept these behaviours as a natural coping mechanism, we can promote people's comfort and well-being. Also, many neurodivergent individuals find prolonged or intense eye contact uncomfortable or even overwhelming, or in some cases I know people find it actively painful. So reducing eye contact level if required, and not assuming that that means that the person isn't listening to you or doesn't respect you or is lying to you, which we're often told, you know, you need to look me in the eyes when I'm talking to you, is actually significantly more helpful in supporting neurodivergent people to communicate authentically. It's also important to understand that if your colleague gets your name wrong or they confuse you with someone else, there is a very good chance that they experience face blindness. So sometimes it is genuinely difficult to differentiate between people who are vaguely similar. For example, I cannot tell the difference between Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan unless they are stood together. I find them super similar, even though they're very, very different people. There's also a higher rate of aphantasia, which is the inability to visualize. So when you say something like close your eyes and picture, people are unable to do that. And that's more common in neurodiverse populations. Although I do know artists with aphantasia, so it doesn't stop you getting kind of things onto paper, it's just with your eyes closed. You're unable to visualize it. Many neurodivergent people will also engage in echolalia, and it's a bit like a vocal stim. So it's the repetition of words, phrases, and it's a form of communication. It helps self-regulate and it helps to process information. I spent about a year in my 20s going around saying, dude, where's my car, dude? I don't really know why, just quite like the sound of it. And it was quite comforting to say that. I'll still do that now, so it's usually song lyrics. But when you recognise that echolalia serves a purpose, and even if that's repeating things back that you have said as an information processing tool, it can foster more meaningful communication exchanges. So it might be that your neurodivergent colleagues prefer a more direct and concise communication style. If you are using metaphoric language, for example, you've opened up a can of worms, what does that mean? Unless you have the context for that, why have you got worms in the office and what are they doing in a can? Surely that's animal cruelty. Because often there can be a really literal interpretation, and that sometimes works both ways. So a lot of people will see what is generally considered to be tact as an outright lie, and honesty may be more important to the individual than stopping hurting people's feelings about something that is perceived not to be important. So I think often neurodiverse people are considered to be blunt when actually it's their intention to be direct and honest. So it will also help if you offer alternative communication styles. So if you have a complex question, give people time to process it. They might respond better in an email, they might respond better in a direct message, they might respond better just given some time to have a bit of a think. Make sure you allow for one question at a time. If you were to give me 3 questions in a row, for example, I guess people do this when they pick up their children from school. Hi, how are you? Did you have a good day? What did you do in gym? That's too much, because which one do you answer first? Do you answer the last one because it was the last one? Do you answer the first one? Is that the most important? There's a lot of processing involved in working out which one you're expected to answer. So if you just give people one question and wait for the answer, that allows sufficient time to formulate a response. And that's going to improve communication and it's going to reduce overwhelm. Providing options for alternative communication styles and processing time is really, really helpful. And actually that applies to everyone, not just neurodivergent colleagues, because everybody's going to have a different communication style. So in the workplace, it's really important to make changes to support people with different thinking styles. This could mean having quiet areas for breaks, giving instructions in different formats, something to suit everyone's needs. So creating a truly neurodiversity friendly workplace involves implementing reasonable adjustments to support their communication needs. And that's covered under the Equality Act 2010. So employers have a legal obligation to make reasonable adjustments to prevent disabled people from being disadvantaged in the workplace. So I've got some suggestions. This isn't going to work for everyone, but it may be helpful to some of your neurodivergent colleagues. You could create a designated quiet area in the workplace with space to get away when they need a break from sensory stimuli, or a quiet environment to focus on tasks. Or alternatively, if you're unable to do that, just allowing for noise cancelling headphones can be really helpful. If you give someone an office mentor or an office buddy who can offer support and guidance, particularly with navigating some of the complex social dynamics, clarifying workplace expectations, which are often tacit. So, for example, this whole bringing cakes in on your birthday, if that is not something you've ever experienced before, you might not know that the rule is you bring a cake in on your birthday and you share it with everyone. And that can really help reduce workplace stress, because people are not expected to just magically understand the tacit expectations of a particular workplace culture. If you give different formats for important information and instructions, so you can offer written, verbal and visual formats, so write down the instructions, tell someone what to do, show someone what to do, they've got a much better opportunity for understanding exactly what is expected of them. Again, concrete language, so no idioms, no figurative language. They can be confusing, they can be ambiguous. So it's raining cats and dogs sounds horrific if you're coming to it from a literal place. Closed and prompt questions, so open questions where it's like, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, could be really difficult for some people, because unless you know exactly what the circumstances are in 5 years' time, it's pretty much guesswork. So it's difficult for people to give you an answer to that, potentially. And prompt questions are often helpful. So in order to support people communicating across neurotypes, do what you're doing now. Provide education, raise awareness, include the understandings of different neurocognitive profiles, different communication styles and potential challenges. If we are aware that it could be a problem, we can already take steps to mitigate some of those difficulties, and it will help reduce misunderstandings, help improve a culture of acceptance and empathy. It's all good stuff. If we actively listen to people, allowing them to fully express themselves without interruption, we can then encourage them to paraphrase or summarize and paraphrase back to them to show we've understood each other. And if we haven't, it's a really good opportunity to clarify exactly what we meant. It's really important to be mindful of non-verbal cues. So that's the body language, facial expressions, and be really explicit clear in verbal communication to supplement this. As I've said before, offering multiple communication channels that accommodate for different preferences, written communication, verbal communication, visual communication, allow people to choose what works best for them. Providing structure and stability in the workplace is a great idea actually for everybody, because then everybody is really clear on what's expected of them during the day. So that can be routines, that can be structures for communication processes. When it is predictable and when we know that it's coming, it reduces a lot of anxiety for neurodivergent people. So clear outline agendas for meetings, set deadlines, provide advance notice of any changes or disruptions wherever you can. It's all really helpful. If you think about the differences that different people need to process information and formulate responses, that can also mean that if you show a bit of patience and you allow for an extended response time, you avoid putting pressure on people to respond too quickly. Often, if you do that, you'll get a, oh no, which isn't really going to move the conversation forward. If you encourage feedback and open communication, people can ask questions, they can ask for clarity, and they can provide honest feedback. So if people are comfortable to express their thoughts and concerns, you'll get a sense of authenticity from the people that you're working with. I would always suggest, if this is important to your neurodiverse colleagues, that you consider reducing the sensory stimuli in the environment. I'm lucky, I have a hybrid role. I work mainly from home or with individuals in their own home. I do go into the office 1 day a week and I get virtually nothing done. And the reason for that is someone will be having a conversation on the phone to a client. That will distract me for a moment, then someone will come in the door, I'll pay attention to that, and then someone will go, oh, does anyone want a cake? And then I'll get distracted by the cake, and I find it very difficult to get into a flow state where I'm able to be really effective in my paperwork. So if you can designate specific areas that are sensory friendly, where you can go if you feel overwhelmed, and those spaces are quiet, they're comfortable, they've got some sensory tools or resources, so that could be things like noise cancelling headphones or fidget toys or weighted blankets, just to help people regulate their sensory experiences. That is often really quite helpful. I would also consider flexible seating options. So that could be ergonomic chairs, standing desks, bean bags, just to accommodate those individual sensory preferences. For example, when I am on the phone, I will pace up and down. I usually use the corridor at work because I don't want to distract people in the office, but I find it really difficult to have a phone conversation without some form of movement. It also, if you're redecorating, consider matte finishes, non-reflective surfaces. Some of us have shiny syndrome where we're like, oh, that's sparkly, and look over there. Again, it's very, very individual, so ask your neurodiverse colleagues what it is that they need and what they think would support them in being as productive as possible. There is lots of evidence that a neurodiverse workforce brings unique strengths to your workplace. We know that Microsoft, Vodafone and other large companies have recruitment drives specifically for neurodivergent people. Some of the reasons for that is that the research is suggesting that neurodiverse people pay particular attention to workplace culture and morale. So they are a really good temperature gauge of what's going on for your organisation. They also often have, but not always, have enhanced visual processing, can be really good at pattern recognition, which is great if you are writing code. You're likely to get diverse perspectives, systematic thinking, usually bottom up rather than top down. So whereas many neurotypical people will start with the kind of grand idea and flesh it out kind of through mission statements and kind of the values and then bring it in, a lot of neurodivergent people will start at the small tasks, and when they have enough of those small bits together, then they can get the bigger picture. You'll also often get honesty and directness and attention to detail. So companies that prioritise diversity and inclusivity by actively recruiting and supporting neurodiverse people have higher levels of employee loyalty and engagement. When people feel valued, respected and supported, they're much more likely to be motivated and commit to their work. If you embrace neurodiversity, you can often enhance your brand image and reputation because you're demonstrating an active commitment to diversity and social responsibility. Those are the kind of companies that attract the top talent, build customer trust, and differentiate themselves in the marketplace. It also aligns with ethical principles of fairness and equality and ensures compliance with legal requirements under the Equality Act, like I previously mentioned. In short, and to sum up, neurodiversity recognises there is a natural spectrum of neurological differences, including both neurodivergent conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and neurotypical individuals. Taking a neuroaffirming approach to neurodiversity means you celebrate these differences as inherent aspects of human variation and foster an environment of acceptance, understanding, and accommodation, which acknowledges unique strengths, challenges of everyone's neurocognitive profile. The concept of divergence in neurodiversity highlights what is considered normal or typical in the brain is influenced by societal, cultural, and historical factors. And this influences how certain neurocognitive traits or behaviours are labelled and perceived within different contexts. Communication difficulties in cross-neurotype interactions come from a two-way mismatch in communication styles rather than any one individual being wrong. Understanding these differences can help us mitigate some of the misunderstandings and improve the quality of our social interactions. Clear communication across neurotypes involves creating environments that respect and accommodate diverse communication styles and preferences, and that includes training, active listening, multiple communication channels, establishing clear expectations, and reducing sensory stimuli. If you've been at all interested in what I have to say, or if you would like to ask me any questions, you can find me on the socials or you can email me and I'll do my best to respond in a reasonable time. Finally, if you're a bit of a research geek, which I obviously am, I thought I'd show my workings. So this is a list of references of some of the studies that I have talked about. Thank you very much for being with me, and I hope you found at least some of this presentation useful.